Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Land Use Hearing Committee. Before we go into the bill, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, the staff person, in regards to the rules and to do a committee count members. Okay, roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, if you could please respond when I call your name for the record. Chairman Reisinger.
Here.
Vice Chair Sneed.
Here.
Councilwoman Clark.
Here.
Councilman Costello.
Here.
Councilman Dorsey.
Here.
Councilman Pinkett.
Here.
Councilwoman Middleton.
Here.
Councilman Stokes.
Yeah.
Councilman Stokes, was that you?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, thank you. And before we go on, I'll just briefly go over how we're going to approach public testimony. So for anyone who is connecting via computer, we ask that you use the raise hand function to let us know that you would like to testify. Users who are calling in cannot be identified by name and will be unmuted by the host one by one during the public testimony portion of the hearing. When you're unmuted, if you do not wish to testify, please say so. Attendees will hear 2 beeps when they're unmuted, and we ask that each speaker state their name prior to speaking. And if a speaker is inaudible, they will be asked to call back or provide testimony through the chat function. And here you can see in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, you should have a button for participants, and a button next to it is for chat. If you click on the participants button, you should be able to see the hand icon that's circled here. Depending on how you've logged in, it may alternatively be next to your name in the list of participants. If you're unable to find the raise hand button, please send a chat to the host if you'd like to testify, and we'll make sure that you get a chance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, we're going to start. We're here for City Council Bill 20-0623. This is zoning signs conversion of existing non-digital billboards. That's the purpose is to convert signs, existing billboard static signs, it's non-digital, to digital. I'll try to keep it very brief as the sponsor. That the existing law is that if you want a digital billboard, you have to put away or delete 3 billboards in order to do a digital. So my purpose is there's a number of entities out there that may only have 2 or 3 billboards that want to do digital, and they can't because of the current law. And so that is the purpose of introducing this bill. Again, I state that we are not adding, this bill does not add any new billboards. There seems to be a confusion sometimes with my colleagues or even people, community leaders and residents, to think that this bill is adding 2 new billboards. So at this time, I will start with the agency reports planning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was a pretty good intro. This bill was reviewed by the Planning Commission in their meeting of October 8th, and in our staff report, there's a little bit of background history over the past couple decades of how billboards have been treated, starting with the March 2000 prohibition of billboards citywide, so it made all existing billboards non-conforming. But over the years, there's been a slight loosening of those controls, which included things like placing advertising on bus shelters, to the bike sharing stations, putting advertisements on those as well. And then when our new zoning code was approved and went into effect in 2017, it was a complete rewrite of the zoning code, and it allowed for new billboards to be created, but only in areas of special signage control, or an ASSC. And that had to be done by way of establishment through ordinance, and it was almost like a PUD for signs, if you want to think of it that way. So there were a couple other bills that I think the chair was alluding to that might be confusing folks. The last one that the committee heard was about the new billboards being placed. That's not this. This is just about taking an existing sign that's a regular static still billboard and converting it or upgrading it to a digital billboard. And why is this important? Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, the mounting of a new sign takes quite a bit of effort, and then you want it to be up for a while. A digital sign can have the copy change at the push of a button. So when we included this in the rewrite of the zoning code, it was definitely seen as a privilege to have that, because in essence, the number of impressions that you're getting on passersby is dramatically increased. If you're changing that copy every 10 seconds, in the span of a minute, you get 6 impressions potentially, instead of just the same sign being there for weeks at a time. So in looking at what this bill does, it makes several changes, and all of this is in Title 17 of the Zoning Code, 17-406E, and this affects all of the requirements of what you need to do if you want to upgrade or convert a sign from a static billboard to a digital billboard. So number one, there's a requirement of that 3-to-1 removal requirement. The whole idea here is to recognize that getting a digital billboard is an improvement. It's a privilege. So we wanted to reduce the clutter of signage around the city by requiring the removal of 3 standard or static billboards to get that upgrade to a digital billboard. And the bill also wants to delete a limitation that a billboard that is being converted can't be relocated by more than 15 feet. That limitation of 15 feet for movement was a carryover from our old code, where billboards have been non-conforming uses for the past 20 years. It also would delete the minimum sign area of 100 square feet to be counted as what is a billboard. That 100 square feet minimum threshold was included in the zoning code because that's the number or the area at which signs start paying billboard taxes. So we thought that was pretty good definitionally of how big or what does a sign need to be in order to be considered a billboard. It shouldn't just be a small poster. It needs to be a real billboard if you're trading the 3-for-1. It would also remove the billboard removal credit, which of course, if you don't need to do any of this, then there's no sense in keeping track of a credit. But the reason why that was there is so that if an owner of a billboard was planning on a future conversion and they had to take down an existing sign, whether it's because it was no longer structurally sound or they don't want to invest in it, they could take it down now and keep that credit for a few years and then apply that to a future 3-to-1 conversion. But if the program goes away, if the bill is adopted as written, then there's obviously no need to have that. In the last 2 changes, it removes an exclusion that would, in current zoning, does not permit billboards that are on buildings that are 35 feet high. The sign is 35 feet high or less, or on a pole that's 35 feet or less. It would remove those exclusions. So that's kind of what the bill does. Staff recommended to the commission against all of these because we had strong reasons. The commission was very sensitive to the applicant's concerns that if you have a small owner that only has 1 or 2 signs, then they don't have the opportunity to do a conversion because they don't own 3 that they can remove to make that upgrade. And so at the end of the day, the commission recommended that instead of adopting the bill as written, that the bill should be amended to make an exception to that first requirement, the 3-to-1 conversion, and add an exception for owners of 7 billboards or fewer. And admittedly, that number was, a bit of a guess as to what's a small owner versus not. We don't know what the realm of possibility is out there, but that was a number that I thought was a reasonable starting point. And then it would remove all the other changes, keeping those requirements for conversion that are already in the code in place. So if you adopt the Planning Commission's amendments, that would be the net effect. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, the floor is open. Evidently, somebody's got to mute. It's too much background noise. Anyone have a question for Eric?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Councilman Dorsey, you got the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you. Has Planning Commission, hello, Eric. Has Planning Commission had such amendments actually drafted? Have they been submitted in a drafted DLR format?
They should have been. They were only done a couple of days ago. So if they have not reached you, I can try and email those in the background.
Maybe Matt Peters knows. And I guess my question is, if so, does that amendment put back in the removal credit banking provision that would still apply for those larger owners?
Yes, it would keep that in.
And does the amendment address the matter of subsidiary or affiliate, subsidiary or affiliate corporations of a common owner?
No, it doesn't. And you bring up a good point. That's actually a potential concern. So if you had a large owner of a number of signs that wanted to spin off smaller subordinate companies, is that the question?
That is exactly the question.
That would potentially be a problem then, yes, you're right about that.
It would seem to me that would be a critical aspect of upholding the intention of the Planning Commission's proposal. If somebody who owns 90 billboards can turn every one of those into an independently, separately owned LLC's ownership, every single one of them becomes then eligible for a 1-to-1 conversion.
Yes, sir. I think you're correct.
Even if they were divided into groups of 7,
right.
They wouldn't have to create 90 LLCs. They'd have to create, I don't know, Eric Costello is probably better at the math than I am. I don't know. 9 LLCs or 12 LLCs, and they could, whatever it is.
Yeah, that would absolutely be a concern.
Yeah.
So if the committee doesn't have our amendments, I can try and email those around in the background. I'm sorry if that didn't reach you.
My other question is on the taxation. Do we tax digital billboards at a different rate than traditional billboards?
That I don't know, actually. I'd have to defer to finance.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Wait a minute, Councilman Dorsey, are you finished?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Councilwoman Clark, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Actually, Councilman Dorsey raised one of the issues I was going to raise, and I'd like to second his remarks. I'd also like to say that we've been through a lot in this city to limit the amount and to organize the amount of billboards there are. I was back when we were taking billboard, and the chairman was with me when we were literally taking those illegal billboards off walls across the city because they weren't even legal, and they were junking up neighborhoods, especially unattended neighborhoods at that time. So basically, I've been involved with this for a long, long time, off and on, and I think that we have a good system now, and I'm concerned about this, but exactly one of the concerns I have is what Councilman Dorsey has raised. Heaven forbid I should be learning some things from, well, always from my colleague, but also from Clear Channel, which is that if a company has a number of billboards, mostly those billboards are on leased space. Someone else owns the ground, and the billboard company owns the billboards. It wouldn't necessarily be just a billboard company that would break out its many billboards into smaller units. It could also be the owners of the land as the leases expire, who could become LLCs of their own and have all of a sudden someplace have a digital board without going through the process that we're making people go through now. We're trying, at least we were trying, to really limit the number of billboards in Baltimore City to as few as we could legally limit them to. And this is just opening the door, not just for this company or that, but for all the people that own the land where a billboard's sitting. Thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman, I understand. Again, this isn't for any proliferation of billboards. It's existing billboards. You understand that. And I just want to say I understand Councilman Dorsey's concern and argument. Does any other committee members have a question for Mr. Tissot?
Yes, I have a question, Chairman. Eric, do each of the billboards in the city require a permit?
They would have at the time that they were constructed. So since they've been non-conforming for the past 20 years, all the ones that exist would be in existence and should have been approved by permit. And any new ones, I don't believe we've had any under the area special signage control. They would also need a permit.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is if they required a permit, shouldn't there be a list somewhere of all of the billboards in the city and the ownership of those billboards?
As I understand it, and that's really a question for the zoning administrator, because a vast majority of the signs that already exist are non-conforming signs, and they date back 20 plus years, unless there was work done to them in recent years that would require rebuilding or periodic maintenance work to be done to them, they wouldn't be in a computerized system. And so in theory, the information should be there, but trying to get at it and consolidate that in a meaningful way, I don't know is possible, but that would be for the zoning office to answer.
Okay, and so part of the reason I'm asking is that you said that there was no methodology behind the selection of the number 7 for, a company that has 7 or less billboards. How do you just pull that number out of the air as this number under which you don't need a 3-to-1 conversion?
Well, admittedly, in the commission's discussion, they were trying to come up with some threshold number of where to apply an exemption because they were sympathetic to the applicant's concern of, if you have a small owner. And so there is admittedly some arbitrariness to that. And Commissioner Victor Clark was the one that proposed 7, and with a 3-to-1 you would at least be able to get 2 out of it in exchange. So it could be a different number, but that was at least a starting point that the commission came up with.
I mean, because if the number is that arbitrary, what would prevent somebody who has 8 signs, somebody who has 10 signs from later coming and challenging, going, how do you deny me from converting my billboards when there's really no analysis into making a decision on which companies or which billboard owners are included and which are excluded. I see this potentially being challenged to the point where anybody who owns a billboard will convert 1-to-1. They're not going to settle for, just because I have more than 7 that I'm not going to be able to convert. I don't even see how this is going to stand against any legal challenge.
Eric, I'll answer that. Councilman Pinkett, the Planning Commission is basically a recommendation. Can you hear me? They recommended a 7. I don't know how we came about with 7, but Commissioner Clark came out with number 7. What they're doing is they just sort of like punt the football over to the council, and then it's up to us whether we want to go with 7, 10, 11, or leave it as it is. I hope that answers your question. So it's just a recommendation from the Planning Commission.
Right. I mean, and that's fine. So I guess what you're saying is that we're not beholden to the number 7. We can select any number, but it's still I think the burden is still there for us to determine, even if we come to a number 7, why do you agree on that number as the number that determines?
I agree. That's why we're here and it's open for discussion.
And this isn't necessarily a question, but if this was designed in order to minimize the number of billboards, then what has changed that would cause for us to consider, changing the legislation if the intent was to minimize the proliferation of billboards? Quite frankly, the nature of billboards has changed. So one billboard, as Eric said, is no longer one static billboard. It is multiple billboards. So, while we say this is not an increase in billboards, it is an increase in billboards because you are exponentially increasing the number of billboards because a billboard is not static any longer.
Yeah, it's in regards to advertising, you're correct. Instead of having one advertisement, you have a number of advertisements. But let me just add this. On my way over here today, the story is going over from Caton Avenue to Russell Street. Where the Stadium is. There's 2 billboards that are digital on the right-hand side, which is owned by Clear Channel. It's a fact. And then to the left was another billboard, which is static, which is owned by another billboard that doesn't have that many billboards. I think that they can do the 3-to-1 ratio. So as Eric, I like that word, it's privileged. So one company's privileged that they have the opportunity to do, they got hundreds and hundreds of billboards, but the company that only has a few has to stay put. They don't have the opportunity to, to make the billboard digital. So it is a question. I came up with number 3 because it's 3-to-1. The commissioner came up with 7. It's a discussion in regards to the council, what they want to do. That's why we're having a hearing. But I don't think it's not mandated by the Planning Commission. It's a recommendation. Correct, Eric?
Yes, sir. And, from the staff's perspective, we had originally just recommended disapproval on the bill entirely because zoning was about the what, not the who. Yeah. And, once you start to blend that line, it becomes more difficult to objectively, pick where that boundary needs to be. And, that's difficult to legislate along that line.
Yeah. Leon, you have any more? You have anything else?
Well, I guess just in a general question to Eric, is zoning about providing I guess an effective or equal playing ground for business environment, or is zoning about the land use? And this sounds like we are trying to use zoning in order to equalize the business atmosphere, and that's not the intent of zoning. I don't believe so.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I mean, it looks at the what, not the who, but you'll hear a different take on that from the applicants, because if you own fewer signs than the conversion requirement, then you don't get to convert. Planning staff thought that that was exactly the way it was intended to be, but the commission was sympathetic to that potentially anti-competitive nature.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Pinkin. Anyone else have any questions or statements? Yes, Councilwoman Middleton,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
you have the floor.
I first concur with all of my colleagues and the statements and questions that they have mentioned. Eric, didn't this bill come before Transform Baltimore at one time? Or a similar bill when we were doing the work for Transform Baltimore?
Well, during Transform, there was quite a discussion on this, yes, because it was a new requirement. Previously, the way conversions were done is because signs were considered non-conforming because they had been prohibited since 2000. Each one of them had to go to the zoning board for a determination of how do you handle changes to them. And to kind of summarize how this went, because I did a lot of the research for that. In the old code, there was a prohibition on something along the lines of blinking, flashing, fluctuating animation effects in signs. They need to be a still sign. And if anybody remembers those tri-panels, that's what it was for. So the question became, if you have a digital billboard that can change the copy at the push of a button, you could, in essence, have a live computer monitor with full flowing graphics on it, and we didn't want that. All right, so then the question became, if we permit a change in media, because it was different from, way back in the day, billboards used to be the wallpaper kind that you had to get up there and kind of glue them on, to more of a shrink wrap type. This is just a different way to show a static sign. Well, how quickly may we change it before it runs afoul of that blinking, flashing, fluctuating animation of light prohibition? And so it went from the zoning board to the planning commission. 10 seconds was drafted. There was a lot of discussion during the transform process, and the net result was the zoning code as it is now that requires that conversion. You may also remember that there was a basically identical bill perhaps a year ago that was introduced. It didn't make progress. They needed more time, and I believe it timed out. So this was a reintroduction to allow you to hear it.
Okay. A number of our districts, we have a lot of similarities, but we do have districts that are kind of different. And I'm kind of visualizing the district that I represent and how it's laid out. And I do have some billboards, but they are in an area that's getting ready to go through a major revitalization, and just imagining a digital billboard in one of the areas would be devastating, because it's so close to a set of homes. I can imagine at nighttime all the blinking lights and all the things that would just drive that whole street of residents just off the charts. So this is a very touchy situation. And again, I concur with a lot of the points that my colleagues have brought up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee members want to chime in?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead. Councilman.
I think I heard Councilman Costello. I'd be glad to defer until after everybody else who wants to speak has asked questions.
Okay, Councilman Costello, you got the floor? You want to speak?
Actually, this is Matt Stegman from, I think that may have been who.
Oh, sorry.
But as it so happens, I actually wanted to be recognized so I could answer Councilman Dorsey's previous question about the tax rates for billboards.
Go ahead.
So conventional billboards are taxed at $5 per square foot. Electronic billboards are taxed at $15 per square foot. And I'm going to drop into the chat for the committee members and the attendees a citation for that. But I did want to circle back to the councilman's question and make sure that that was answered.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Matt. Mr. Chair, I do have another question. I do see Councilman Costello's hand up.
Okay, Councilman Costello?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just out of curiosity, is that the, and I apologize if I missed it, is that the reason why the 3-to-1 ratio exists, because the amount of tax revenue that it brings in?
That was not our intent for the reduction. No, it was just to achieve an overall reduction in a meaningful way.
Okay, I mean, I just found it curious that
that was dumb luck.
Oddly enough, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilman Dorsey, you have something you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things came up from Councilman Pinkett and Councilwoman Clark that I hadn't really considered until I heard them, and I think there's some really salient points there. One, I hadn't considered that. I don't know how many billboards that are leased and controlled by a media company are actually owned by that, versus how many are maybe owned by that company. And it occurs to me that when talking about this number, is the number 7, is the number 3, is the number 4 or 9 or whatever, really at this point, the only number that matters is 1. Anybody with just 1 would become entitled to convert that. And while I brought up the point earlier about the issue of breaking down, huge numbers that may be owned by a parent company or a single entity, it hadn't occurred to me that probably a company like that doesn't own all of them in the first place, that they're probably leasing from a whole lot of people who own just 1. And so this would open up the possibility of potentially every single billboard in the city to be converted to digital as soon as a lease expires and the owner of it gets wise to. For that matter, I don't see why the owner couldn't apply for every single one. It doesn't have to be the lessee that applies. Eric, did this come up at all? I mean, if an owner of just one billboard is having their billboard leased and controlled by some tenant media company, can't the owner of that billboard apply for the conversion if they only own one billboard? It doesn't have to be the lessee who controls 4 or 5 or 600, right?
Eric, you want to answer that?
The property owner absolutely could apply because they own the sign. There is also a provision for assigning that to a tenant if somebody is leasing the sign, but I believe the owner has to sign off on it.
But it wouldn't have to be the tenant who was applying if there was a tenant. Even if there was a tenant, the owner could still apply for the conversion 1-to-1 if that's the only one that they own.
Yes.
That to me is an indication that we really, especially as Councilman Pinkett noted, we don't have any record that we can reference that tells us who owns what billboards in the city. And for that matter, we don't even have probably don't even have a full account of all of the billboards in the city. We may know which ones were taken down some years ago because they were illegal, and where, some folks may have an institutional memory of where those billboards were and they were taken down, but we don't necessarily know where every single one is. That seems like a pretty critical piece of information if you're considering a 1-to-1 potential conversion for every single one.
Councilman Dorsey, that'd be a good question if you want to, when it comes to those companies that's leasing out.
Okay, and then I think I had one other thought.
Go ahead.
I want to come back to Councilman Pinkett's point about the zoning code being used to regulate business. This really does seem like a stretch of what the zoning code is intended to do. I have a hard time, having not had a lot of thought about this. I feel like there's got to be some analogy in here where if we were to say a person who just has one house can turn that house into 5 apartments, regardless of certain other considerations, regardless of what zoning district it happens to be in. But that if you have 5 houses, then you can't convert any of them into apartments. It just seems to me like using the zoning code to create exemptions on the basis of these kind of business considerations, it really does seem outside the scope of what the zoning code is intended to do. And so I just wanted to thank Councilman Pinkett for bringing that up. And I guess I wonder again, I don't know if it was asked directly, was that question raised by the Planning Commission or during the Planning Commission hearing?
The question of what, fundamentally being, one-to-one, no, that didn't come up.
Yeah, I mean, the question of really, is it even something that the Planning Commission should be considering within the scope of a zoning bill? Business regulation and essential business regulation, is that beyond the scope of what a zoning bill should do?
Well, that was in essence what we were getting at in our staff report where, and I could probably pull it up to find out. But anyway, I said something akin to the idea of, the use is the use and we don't consider ownership. And so that was the reason that staff recommended disapproval of the bill in its entirety. So that did come up.
Yeah, Eric, can you send Councilman Dorsey staff's report if he doesn't have it?
I have that.
You have it? Okay.
I have it, yes. I guess my last thought is the zoning code and related considerations really have to do with impact to neighborhoods, very largely to impacts to neighborhoods. And that's why we have the BMZA for certain things like that. And it just seems like we're setting up a consideration where because I happen to only own one billboard, it's okay for me to impose light pollution on the community in which my billboard exists. And I think that's a real consideration when I talk to folks in my district, and frankly from many other places around the city. The most common question I hear is, why are we considering conversions to digital at all? Why aren't we trying to get rid of billboards altogether? But at the very least, that let's recognize that digital billboards create light pollution that doesn't exist otherwise. And the right to create that light pollution just because I happen to only own one billboard, that's troubling to me.
Okay. We should have somebody respond to that during the hearing. Okay, Councilman? You good?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? Councilwoman Clark?
I just want to
Still on
respond.
planning. Go ahead.
Yes, I know. I want to respond that if memory serves me correctly from reading through everything, what my colleague is saying is very timely and appropriate, because one of the moving forces is someone who owns one billboard on top of an apartment building or some kind of high rise that wants to digitize it. So that speaks to what my colleague is talking about. Our city, for now decades, has been working to eliminate billboards. Now, I totally support that and was part of the craziness of the beginnings of that. And I can live with the way we're doing it now. And yes, I don't like digitals and I don't like billboards, but if we're going to go through the digital craze, they're going to have to give up. Somebody's going to have to give up some billboards to get that digital. And that is reducing the number because we're not bringing in new billboard locations. So that's what this is about. And this is a proliferation after we've gone through all these years of getting to sort of a somehow digital billboards are helping us get rid of the total number of billboards. And people, if anybody who got all the mail I did about the railroad billboard issue knows how people out there feel about billboards. This hearing, and I'm glad we're having it, but this hearing was not as well publicized, etc., or we would be having, and it's very complicated and confusing, or we'd be having the same emails from all these neighborhoods. Get rid of these billboards. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we can go on to the other agencies. Anyone else have something to add?
Yes, I do. I just have a question. Did we get compile any 311 complaints from neighbors who have these digital billboards near them? The only billboard that always comes to light is the one on 83, and though there are some condos and apartments right there around it, I was just curious if we ever got the number to actually pull the data to see if anyone has made any 311 complaints about the existing digital billboards.
I don't think anybody, we'll probably have to go through 311 system to find that out, Councilwoman.
I just thought that would be a good place to start, and it would be people who actually live near that to actually speak out on whether it has affected them firsthand or not.
It's a good question. It's a good point. I'll have Matt go through 311 to try to answer that question, but it's a good question. Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay. Are you done, Councilwoman Sneed?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go to BMCA. BMCA was unfavorable. Let's go to DOT.
Hello, Mr. Chair. This is Liam Davis with Baltimore City DOT.
Yes.
We stand by our bill report, which is no objection.
Thank you. Let's go to the Law Department.
Hi, Mr. Chair. This is Hillary Ruley for the Law Department. We stand by a report. We would approve it for form and legal sufficiency. And I also looked at the amendments that Mr. Tiso sent around a few moments ago, and we would approve those for form and legal sufficiency should they be adopted.
Okay. Thank you, Hillary. HCD?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Stephanie Murdoch, Legislative Liaison for the Department of Housing and Community Development. We stand by our report and defer to planning.
Thank you, Steph. At this time, we will go to public testimony. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a reminder before we start, for everyone who's attending from the public, if you're joining us by computer, please use the raise hand function to let us know if you would like to testify. If you're unable to find the raise hand function, you can use the chat to send a message to the host to let us know. We can also add you to the list that way. And I believe we're going to start with Al Berry. Mr. Barry, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Reisinger and members of the committee. You're going to hear three people that are part of our group that represent, in a sense, one property owner with one billboard who originally went to the zoning board to get approval for a conversion for an existing billboard on Martin Luther King and across from State Center. Been there for over 50 years. There was no community opposition to it, and the board, in recommending approval, basically told the owner that they had to remove 3 billboards. They were relying on a section of the code in Transform that had just been passed that conflicted with a separate section. So planning recognized the ambiguity of this, and when they went back to the city council for the overall, a new sign chapter, they put in these provisions to, in effect, clarify that. The subject bill was introduced, as someone mentioned, as a replacement for a previous bill that was just on hold, and with the same provisions. So I had sent over to the council by email and hand packages material. You're going to hear later from an attorney for the owner, and you're going to hear from Will Shanklin, who operates the iconic sign on Charles Street north of Penn Station. And Mr. Shanklin is a recognized expert on billboards and lighting, and will dispel some of the complaints that some people may have about this bill. Let me give an overall discussion about this bill. First of all, in our opinion, and planning even recognized this, and they recognized it in a lot of different amendments to Transform, that the 21st century does not involve people putting up billboards by pasting signs on old signs. The 21st century will feature more of these digital signs in any number of fashion, whether it's a church, whether it's a commercial business, or, as we're talking about today, billboards. There are several significant differences between this bill and the previous bill that the committee heard. And I think there has been, at least in some quarters, some confusion about that. Secondly, this bill was originally designed without any distinction between somebody who owns 1 billboard or somebody who owns 800 billboards. I have sent the committee a list that we received from, 2 lists that we received from the city. There are approximately 900 billboards in the city of Baltimore. There's a list that lists zoning and where they are. Of those, approximately 800 are controlled by one company. There is one other company that, from talking with them, I believe they own 10 billboards. But the original purpose of the bill was not to single anybody out or give anybody any favoritism. It was to correct a inequity that Councilman Dorsey references, that zoning should not be looking at helping or hurting business conditions. Well, this bill absolutely, the current zoning code absolutely hurts business conditions, because it requires a property owner with 1 billboard to approach a competitor and have them decide to either sell them or remove 3 billboards. In my experience, I am not sure that there has, since Transform, there have been any removal of any billboards. So all the digital conversions took place before Transform Baltimore was passed or went into effect. So I think for business reasons, the city ought to allow the 21st century signage to be reviewed. Again, these require zoning board approval. I've spoken with some of you about the notion that, as far as we were concerned, we would not mind this if each conversion had to go to city council, frankly. The city put in a sign district, which could not apply to an individual property owner, but to convert these, We would have no objection if they become city council approval rather than zoning board. Also, the city existing code has to speak to Councilwoman Middleton's concern, the zoning code has an existing prohibition on conversion of these signs that are within 250 feet of a residential area. And so that's not being changed under this bill. There are light standards in the bill. There are safety standards that were developed with planning, Department of Transportation. Those are not affected by this bill. And you're going to hear later from Mr. Shanklin on the actual light impact of these signs, which is far less than what somebody might be imagining. To the Councilwoman Sneed's concern about the I-83 billboards, I personally was involved in several of those that went up. They went up with community support, either from Hamden Community Council or the Woodbury Association. And those followed some negotiations with the association on the location, height, lighting conditions, and so forth. So there is a review process for these. The zoning board has it now. Some people may think that it should go to city council. From my standpoint, we would be agnostic about that if the council wants to have it on a case-by-case basis, and frankly put other concerns or considerations that the council will be required. I gave to finish my testimony, I sent the committee today some actual relationships or actual considerations that the law department asked that this be found. And I don't have to read those to you, but it deals with consistency with the city's comprehensive plan, promotes public health, safety, consistency. All of that is documented in my email to you today and can answer any questions about it. The Locust Point Association, I read their letter. I think there was an aspect that they felt that this would lead to proliferation, as some of you have said. It doesn't lead to a proliferation, but there was one recommendation by planning that might have resulted in what it would appear to be a new billboard. And that was removing the 15-foot relocation limit. The current zoning code said if you have an existing billboard to convert, you have to rebuild it within 15 feet. The bill, for whatever reason, eliminated that. From my standpoint, you could leave that in there. You could also leave in the 100-foot square foot minimum if you wanted to. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions and then ultimately turn over to Mr. Burgunder, who's the
Al. Yeah, Al,
Yes.
listen, before any of the committee members, my colleagues, entertain any questions, I didn't know, do you have a panel or are they calling individually? Because I wanted, because of the number of participants and all, if it's a panel, if they're calling, I'm only going to allocate like 3 minutes because of the number of people.
Well, I don't know who's signed up to testify, but I've given Matt Peters the names and the phone numbers of the two.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. So
thank you. Does any committee? Okay, I'm sorry. Does any committee members have a question for Al Berry? No? Okay. Let's move on, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I was trying to get unmuted.
Go ahead. You have a question to Al Berry?
Yeah, thanks. Al, you sent over a list, it looks like, that shows the addresses of all of the billboards. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing here, it's got, I don't know, 15 to 20 entries at the beginning that are electronic display, followed by quite a number of pages of standard display. That's the same one we're talking about?
That's correct. There are two The first one I sent to Matt was sort of handwritten.
Yeah.
And the second
But
one
this
is
is-
a typed version.
This one, it shows the locations and the type, and it shows the fee and the size, but doesn't show the owners, does it? I guess we didn't hear from finance. I don't think, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if we had not heard from finance. My question, and I know that Matt Stegman did answer a question kind of on behalf. My question was, is it the owner who applies or pays the tax, or is it the tenant, or is it one or the other? Does the city care? Is there a distinction made? Because that seems like that would be a pretty easy way of allowing us to identify who the owner is of a given one.
Yeah, Councilman, looking at this, agencies, the president's office, they didn't send it to finance. So unless Matt, or can someone answer Councilman Dorsey's question about who pays the tax?
I will have to follow up with the councilman about that, but I have made a note of it, and I will reach out to the finance department.
Okay, Councilman Dorsey?
Yeah, and for clarification, my question is just based on the assumption that if we were to see, for example, all of the taxes, each of the billboards tax being paid for by their property owner, that would be a very clear indication of who owns what.
Well, it's a good question, Councilman. When the representatives from one of the media or both medias may be able to answer that question for you.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Mr. Herbert Bergender.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, please go ahead.
Herbert Bergender on behalf of Bay Properties. The City Council has already made judgments as to the decision to have fewer billboards. Unfortunately, the 3-for-1 exchange, as it is, has not resulted in the removal of any billboards that we know of. So if you're judging it based on 4 years of in operation success, it hasn't done anything to eliminate billboards. What we're proposing is in line and in keeping with the value judgments that are already made in the zoning code. So Councilman Dorsey raised an issue of, well, what should the zoning code be used in this way? Well, the zoning code is already used in this way. So there was a determination by the City Council that if you got rid of 3 billboards, you could have a digital billboard. There was also the determination that if you were the arena, it would be okay to have digital billboards there, or the stadium, or if it were bike rental places, you could have digital billboard there, or bus stops. So there already has been a determination in the zoning code to permit digital billboards, and I'll pause for a moment to say, in the right circumstances. So the problem with creating a general rule is that it's a general rule and doesn't anticipate exceptions where you might want to have an exception. So for example, if there is a place where it's 250 feet from a residential zone and it faces onto the state office complex and it's on Martin Luther King Boulevard, which is a busy thoroughfare, and it's a billboard that's been there for 50 years, you're not creating a new billboard. The billboard already exists. So there might be circumstances, and this addresses some of the other concerns of the council people, there might be circumstances where having upgrading to a digital billboard is advantageous to the community. So if you look at, and Mr. Shanklin will address that, there are opportunities for it to be advantageous to the community. And obviously, we're not asking that standards be eliminated. We're asking that the Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals or the City Council itself determine whether that location is appropriate. The problem with the general rule is that you eliminate opportunities when it is appropriate. We also don't think that it's fair that the one company can control whether there'll be the removal of any billboards or not, because they won't agree to sell them or permit them to be sold. So I do think that the concerns that the council people have raised, including Councilman Dorsey, can be addressed either in a modification to this or in some regulations or in a determination by the Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals or the City Council itself to make sure that the location of the conversion to the digital billboard is appropriate to the neighborhood. Nobody's saying that it shouldn't be. The only issue is whether you have to get rid of 3 to put up 1 new digital billboard. And so we'd ask that the committee support the change with obviously some modifications to meet the address to the concerns of the council people.
Thank you. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Will Shanklin.
Thank you, Chair. This is Will Shanklin. I'm working with Bay Properties on the project on MLK and North Utah. I'm also business partners with Michael Schechter in the Station North billboard located on top of the Metro Gallery on North Charles Street. As I hope you are aware, it's an arts and entertainment billboard. And as such, we have art displays on it and art-related projects that we have on there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year-round, mixed in with our advertising. I've been taking notes since the meeting started, and I'd like to answer for you all some of the concerns that have come up.
Go ahead.
The one was someone said something about traffic distractions. Billboards in the 15, 20 years ago, when they started doing LED, they was concerned about traffic distractions. But through the years, the boards, they changed where it's not even perceived by the human eye now. It's just like a computer screen. So you don't see a slow transition like you may have used to in the old days. The other thing is what more people find out distracting is the scrolling type of screens like you would see outside of a Walgreens or CVS pharmacy that says 6 rolls of paper towels, 2 for the price of 1 or something like that. Because what people tend to do is they try and read that scrolling text as they're passing by it. But since all of this has started, they now have computer screens in cars where people are reading their Facebook, their text, their emails, they're texting on the phone and everything else. And a billboard has long gone out of any kind of traffic concern because of how quickly they can be read in comparison to those other things that cause much greater traffic distraction. And that can be proved by the Highway Administration, who used to do the data on that, because the Highway Administrations now use digital billboards themselves to talk to commuters. For instance, they put out the Amber Alerts, they put out traffic jam ahead, they put out the tunnel will be closed for the next so many days, and they place those LED screens. They're not as sharp as a regular advertising screen because they don't want to spend the money for something to be, like a television quality, but they are LED screens, and they put them directly overhead on a highway, and they also put them right on the shoulder of a highway. So the traffic concern, has long been put by the wayside with LED screens. The light emission, that is something that since I've been working with billboards for going on 20 years now, has been worked on. And the company that I favor and work with, for instance, they do 50% reduction in light emission in what billboards used to be just 5 years ago. The technology, what they do now, they actually redirect the light diodes down and inward so that they don't project straight out like they used to. On top of that, the upper part of the billboard the diodes are directed another 27% downward. So it's not, you don't have wasted light going up that's not even being read. And on top of that, they put louvers now that reduce that even further, an extra 30%. So when it all comes out, the modern LED billboard now gives out less upward light and light pollution than a standard static billboard that just has lights that point up to the board and straight up into the sky, just blaring out random light. So that I think that you all will be glad to hear that that's something that was a major concern for years and has been addressed, especially by the more cutting edge companies when they create their billboards, and that's, you know, obviously the company that we use. As far as clutter and aesthetics that I heard somebody talking about, I'm from Baltimore, but I have done projects in Nashville, Atlanta, all over the United States. I've participated in helping people come up with a program. And the way most of the cities are eliminating having to worry about individual billboard owners coming to them and wanting to do a project or do just change their sign into a digital sign, they now do each board on a case-by-case basis. In other words, the board that we want to do on MLK is going to replicate the arts and entertainment billboard that we started for the past 5 years in Station North. That has been such a success and have so many success stories with people that have been positively affected from being on the board. They've gotten jobs, they've got internships, they've gotten scholarships. They've actually had their film shown on HBO. They've been requested to have their art in galleries in Europe from people that have seen it virally on the internet. So it's actually changed lives, and some people even told us it saved their lives by meeting likewise people and networking with them and finding a career path that they never knew that they could have. So I believe that doing this in West Baltimore, especially with the new Black Arts and Entertainment District starting up, is priceless. And I cannot imagine anybody feeling that it would not be a help and do anything but to boost West Baltimore by giving the citizens there and the local business owners such a boost where they get free advertising for their small businesses, and the artists and the citizens in that neighborhood are allowed to showcase their creativity and put their thoughts and passions out on a grand scale on a billboard for everybody to see. Now, I have this note here that someone was saying that each billboard, when you turn it LED, turns into 6 billboards. That is not the case because it is still in one location. A billboard is based on its location. A billboard that is in a abandoned, empty street with one business on it does not have the same potency as a billboard that's right outside of Camden Yards. So, when you make one billboard, it's not like you have 6 locations. You just have the opportunity to give more advertisers the ability to advertise at a lower cost because you can put more advertisers on that single board. In other words, our billboard that used to rent for a high price to one advertiser can now, because we have multiple advertisers on it, we can do a price for a national advertiser, and we can do a smaller, shorter amount of time price for a local startup where somebody on North Charles Street or Fells Point creates their own clothing and does not have the advertising budget that other people do. The main way that other cities are stopping a proliferation where everybody and their mother just comes up with billboards that they want to turn LED is they make each and every one have to be vetted on an individual basis. Does the community want it? Does the business community want it? Is it going to benefit the neighborhood in which it's in? Is it going to add to anything? Is it going to give artwork? Is it going to give free advertisement? Is it going to be able to be used to aesthetically improve the neighborhood? So that eliminates the fear of things that we may not consider or take into account right now, and forces each and every person that wants to do an LED to have a good reason to do it. And as long as you have to go through that 3 or 4 or 5 tier step process by being approved by all these different agencies and showing that it's a good legitimate reason that you want it, then you eliminate just trash from popping up everywhere.
Yeah. Do you have any more notes?
I think that's more than enough for right now.
Yeah. No, I just question. I do have one question. How many billboards do you have?
That we own is just one. But what I do is I help other cities create these arts and entertainment projects, and that's something that I'll say is pretty frustrating because we keep hearing that we've been working for 20 years or whatever to eliminate billboards, but what I see compared to other cities who used to do the same thing is we oversteered to the point where we don't allow anything new and progressive to happen because we're trying to eliminate everything altogether.
Somebody's got to unmute. Somebody's got to mute. I hear static. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
For instance, in Nashville and Atlanta, I did projects there where they also did not want billboards. But what we did, we came up with billboards that actually ended up being invited and wanted by the city because of what they do. For instance, the Nashville billboard, it has advertising on it, but it also has local musicians and artists and creative people be able to put their stuff up on there to be recognized and help their careers along, where a standard billboard is you're not up here unless you've got a ton of money to advertise, like your Garth Brooks or somebody like that. And then the same thing with Atlanta. They did not want just billboards, but what they did, they put one right in the square where the Olympics were when the Atlanta Olympics were there, and that board is going to be utilized for advertising, but to also display art, but to showcase movies for the community in front of a gathering of things.
Okay. Thank you. Are you finished?
Yeah. I'm finished.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer technical questions.
Okay. Anyone have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Dorsey, you got the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Mr. Shanklin, thanks so much for your testimony, and thanks for what the LED billboard is and what it means to Baltimore's arts community. As somebody from the arts community, a graduate of the Peabody Conservatory, my wife, a Micah alum, the vast majority of our social network being people involved in the arts community. I recognize the contribution of the LED billboard, and I think it's great. As an art collector, primarily of living artists in Baltimore City, I probably own at least a half a dozen, if not a dozen pieces by different artists whose work has been shown on that. I know for a fact that the most recent piece of art that I purchased is somebody who I've known since I'm 38 years old. I've known him since I was 14, and I've seen his work on the billboard. So it's real cool, and I really appreciate it. I guess you talked about doing work in so many different places, specifically related to the display of arts and this same kind of model. I'm wondering, do any of the and you also talked about having to go through a rigorous process. Do any other places that you are aware of have any codified standards as to what is an arts LED billboard versus some other type of billboard? Or do they just take it at somebody's word or some kind of MOU or something that the billboard is going to dedicate a certain percentage of its operating time to the display of art and things like of that nature?
Well, I can say that our board right here in Baltimore, the Station North Board, was the first billboard to do the things that we do to such an extent. See, our billboard not only displays art and creative works, it has the name of the artist at the base, and we have a website that you can go to, punch in that artist, and see their portfolio and contact them to hire them, commission them to do work or internships or purchase their work directly from them.
I'm aware of that.
So other cities that have come to me from seeing it in advertising books and in art books, magazines, they have come to me and asked to help out create something like that in their cities. And most other cities from, Los Angeles, Denver, Boston, DC, they have all started going through that transition now of realizing that, yes, the old style billboards where it was owned by, a monopoly company that just wants to advertise, take money and go and not add anything to the community is terrible. But we're passing up the opportunity to do great things like they did here in Baltimore and Station North, stuff that actually adds to the community.
My question, does anybody have a codified standard for what makes an arts billboard?
The cities are starting to form that, but in the meantime, what they have done is they have created art districts or entertainment districts to be able to allow that certain billboard there. Like Boston, that one, they have it around the ballpark. So you're allowed to have billboards around there that you normally would not be allowed to have because it's more of a festive area. Other places, they have a arts district, so they allow it there, but they don't allow it in the neighborhood communities that are more laid back, and they've got a lot of townhouses and apartment buildings where people don't want a billboard unless it's a really interactive billboard that entertains the residents there. So no, nobody has a standard set now. They're getting more and more like that, but the way that they're eliminated in the meantime, while everybody in the nation is coming up with some kind of standard, they are saying from this point forward, each one is on a case-by-case basis. Just because we allow this one that's going to be an art-related billboard, we're not going to say that everybody and their mother can just change into a LED billboard, because what is your intention? You're going to have to let us know. And we want billboards, if we're going to have them in our city, they're going to be progressive. They're going to give back to the city as much as they're going to take. And that eliminates all the what ifs. What if somebody is being ran by Clear Channel right now, but then they decide at the end of their term they want it themselves and they want to start doing an individual project themselves, or somebody wants to do 90 different LLCs. It eliminates all that, because whatever you want to do, you have to have it approved, and it has to meet the standards
I got you. I think we get the point. Yeah, but I think that this really does address, what's on my mind is that not only is there kind of an individual case by case basis, but of evaluation, but that there are certain things that are given, a community return that are given some consideration. I guess I'd be interested if we do think that and I think that I think there is some truth to the matter that a lot of truth to the matter that the arts return a lot to communities. If that's something that, we could codify as a standard, then that's something that I think could be given some consideration.
Yeah, Councilman, I think that this is very healthy in regards to the arts and entertainment. Maybe that's something, I'm just stating a fact that with the new council, maybe they can come up with a commission or sit down and maybe come up with a remedy to that. So, are you done, Councilman?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Anyone else?
Are you able to still hear me?
Yeah. Mr. Councilman Pinkett, you got your hand?
I had a question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Is Eric Tissot still with us?
He should.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Mr. Shanklin mentioned the Black Arts and Entertainment District, and I appreciate the fact that that signage could potentially go to benefit that district, although it's about a mile away from the actual district. Back in 2015, when I worked in the mayor's office, actually made a proposal that at Penn North we would create a similar signage similar to Station North for that same purpose for the Arts and Entertainment District. And what I'm curious, Eric, is that I thought that type of effort could be addressed under the area of special signage control, and I thought that was the reason why that designation was even created, so that in situations like an art district, a community could come together to determine not only the billboard signage, but the other signage in the area that would enhance the district. Am I incorrect in that assumption, or?
No, you're correct. Though I would caution, because I believe I participated in that original billboard approval that we're talking about many years ago. The one concern that I would have is, if something is an arts billboard versus just a regular not arts billboard, we can't control the copy because that's protected speech. So we can't touch that with zoning. So I'm not sure how you would differentiate between an arts district billboard other than the type, place, manner of construction, but the message itself, the copy on the sign, I don't know that we have a mechanism to control that.
No, and I wasn't trying to get into the weeds as it relates to the content necessarily of but the type of billboard that's in Station North that in this instance has an arts perspective. I think that that could be replicated in the Penn North or in the Penn North Arts District through the area of special signage control.
Yes.
And so we wouldn't have to use a billboard at MLK in Utah if the Arts District and the Main Street and Penn North and Druid Heights and Upton came to some agreement, they could recreate a dedicated billboard right in their own district.
Yes, and that would be through an ordinance.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Councilman. We can move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Caroline Hecker.
Hi, Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg, Martin, Greenberg. I'm here on behalf of Clear Channel Outdoor. I think on the phone, although I can't see the other attendees, Frank Boston from our team and Steve Ginsberg are also present today. I know this hearing's been going on for a while and a lot's been said. I won't take up too much of your time, but I do want to respond to a couple of things. A lot has been said today, either directly or indirectly, to allude to this bill being about the big guy versus the little guy, Clear Channel versus these independent operators. But that's really a red herring here. This bill has far more wide-ranging consequences than I think even its own proponents appreciate. This almost seems like we're using a bazooka when a fly swatter would do. Baltimore has a history with billboards. We had a moratorium for 20 years almost. And then when Transform came into effect, that was after many years of careful study with the planning department, the law department, the outdoor advertising industry, the community members were all brought in. And as a result of that, we created a process for digital billboards to be allowed in Baltimore. And they're allowed in one of two ways, either by removing 3 existing billboards to convert 1 to digital, or by creating an area of special signage control. And just parenthetically, I would note, I heard it mentioned a couple of times today that no billboards have been removed since Transform, and that's simply not true. Clear Channel has removed 10 billboards in the last couple of years, and we haven't put up any new ones since Transform. The ones that have been put up were put up under prior authorization prior to Transform coming in. The billboards are clearly a hot topic right now. There have been 2 bills in the city council in the last couple of weeks. The hearing on the other one, which related to railroad rights-of-way along interstate highways, the hearing was canceled last week after there was a groundswell of community opposition. That bill actually had relatively limited application compared to this one. It only applied to railroad properties along interstate highways, but it would have allowed a lot of new billboards to be constructed. This bill, by contrast, applies all over the city, and it will allow the unregulated proliferation of digital billboards, not only along highways, but in neighborhoods and along local arterial roads. Non-digital billboards, you may not notice them. They're not lit up and they're just sort of part of the community a lot of times. If they become digital, you're going to notice where they're located. And there are a lot of them. I think there's been testimony today that there are several hundred billboards in Baltimore, most of which are not digital. So if you thought that the railroad billboard bill was wide-reaching, this one really is much broader. If the city council wants to affect a policy change about billboards, then it should do it on a comprehensive level. Like I said, there was a bill about railroads, there's this bill today. The right way to do this is to do a comprehensive study with the appropriate stakeholders, the industry leaders, the community representatives, the planning department, the law department, and get together and figure out the right way to do it in a way that is, responsible for the city. Transform Baltimore was the result of years of study, and it shouldn't be just thrown out on a whim, and it shouldn't be addressed in this piecemeal fashion. There's been a lot of discussion today about the unknowns. Where did this number 7 billboards come from? What about the arts and entertainment billboards? How do you define those? And I think there's a question that I think was answered about, do we have a list of billboards? I know Clear Channel provides a list of its billboards, its inventory every year when it pays its billboard tax. It has to provide a reconciliation. So there is a list of billboards out there and who owns them. But as I said at the beginning, this bill has, I think, been mischaracterized as being about Clear Channel versus the little guy. But the effect is really going to be to allow every billboard to convert to digital. And I think it was Councilman Dorsey who really hit it on its head earlier. Almost all of the billboards that Clear Channel has are leases with their landlords. And when their lease is up, the landlord will perceive most of the time correctly that they can make more income if the billboard were a digital billboard. They're going to want to convert it to digital. And under this bill, if this bill passes, even if Clear Channel says, no, I'm not interested, we're not going to convert to digital, they can just go to another billboard operator, or they can do it themselves. Clear Channel, over the last, because of the moratorium, has been the primary operator in Baltimore. They really have brought order to the marketplace here. If anybody with a big digital sign can put up a big digital sign anywhere in the city where there are billboards, there's going to be chaos. There is the potential to have so many digital billboards without any real oversight. And the consequence of this legislation is just so much broader than the couple of operators that it is introduced to help. And I think if we want to try to solve their problem, there's probably another way to do it. It should be studied more comprehensively in the next city council term. We should look at billboards and outdoor advertising generally and come up with a way to do this properly. But this bill is not the way to do it. So for all of these reasons, we urge the committee to vote against the bill today.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next caller, Matt.
Hi, Mr. Chair, I have a question for Caroline.
Yeah, Councilman Dorsey, go ahead. You got the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. Can you tell Dan how much more money you can make off of a digital billboard than a standard billboard?
I don't know off the top of my head. I imagine it varies based on the location of the billboard and what kind of traffic it gets.
But it's pretty safe to assume that that's the reason why somebody would convert from standard to digital, is that you can make more money off of a digital.
Sure, you can sell 6 advertisements compared to 1.
Yeah, I'm thinking about as you say, the city has taken significant steps over the last 20 years to reduce or at least stop the growth of the number of billboards in the city, and making something more lucrative by converting it to a digital billboard is almost a guarantee that it's never going to go away.
Yes, I think I would agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. So it definitely, basically everyone that would convert to digital is moving us farther away from the goal of having fewer billboards. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Kate Mccombs.
Kate?
Kate, are you able to
Can you
hear
hear
us? Yes, we can.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kate Mccombs. I'm here as president of the Locust Point Civic Association. We did submit a letter of opposition to this bill on October 21st. Our 3 main concerns, as highlighted in that letter, are safety, light pollution, and aesthetics, and I won't reiterate the points of that letter here today, although we do still stand by those concerns. Our goal as LPCA is to make Locust Point as safe, welcoming, and attractive to current and new residents as possible. We love our neighborhood and the city, and we want to encourage newcomers to visit and to live here, and we want to encourage current residents to stay here. We understand that this bill does not create new billboards. That much is clear. But it's worth noting that digital billboards are more offensive than traditional, both for the light and the safety reasons. And at least now, any conversion to digital is accompanied by a decrease in the overall billboard seen across the city and our community. LPCA believes that this overall decrease is better for both the community and our city as a whole. And those points were made clear a couple weeks ago at the Planning Commission hearing, where so many people across the city spoke out against the proliferation of new billboards. We're especially cognizant of the changes created by this bill in light of that bill 20-0570, which has been tabled and not withdrawn, and the fact that the overall number of billboards in the city is poised to increase significantly sometime soon, possibly. The LPCA hopes to protect our city and community and believes that this bill causes more harm than good, and for that reason we ask that you oppose, the committee opposes. Thank you.
Kate, thank you for your thoughts and your emails and your testimony. Have a good day. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It looks like Frank Boston had his hand up. Mr. Boston?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Frank Boston III. I am a legislative attorney here on behalf of Clear Channel Outdoor, working with Caroline Hacker and for Steve Ginsburg. Actually, I'll make a few points, but Caroline has pretty much delivered the testimony that was pretty succinct and incorporated everything I think I was going to say. I would like to reiterate that this bill, as it stands or as amended, undercuts the longstanding city's policy with regards to billboards. It goes against the planning staff recommendation, and the 3-to-1 replacement was done pursuant to a comprehensive zoning plan. And if we're going to get into the space, we should tread along the same cautious path of doing it comprehensively, bringing all of the communities in, bringing all of the interested parties in, and figuring out which direction we want to go through. The unintended consequences, I think many of the members of the committee, council members of the committee, nailed it. You picked up on it. They will, no matter what, with this bill, even as amended, there will be a proliferation of more digital billboards. There will be creative writings of LLC formulations to get around any 7-to-1 requirements. The creation of special arts districts, that's really interesting, and in some cases it does make sense. And I would profit to this committee that we already have a mechanism in place to achieve those goals. It's called areas of special sign controls, in which again, everyone comes together. Planning department, planning commission has input, the community has input. It comes back and before the city council, and there's a lot of deliberation, a lot of discussion of what makes sense and how to make it attractive. So the tools are already in the box if we want to go down the road. But also the previous suggestion that was made by the chair, Mr. Reisinger, that maybe that's something that could be taken up in the next council. But with that, I'll stand for any questions. Thank you for hearing me out, but we respectfully oppose this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Boston. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do not have anybody else with their hand raised, but we have a couple additional callers. Unmute the first one now. Caller, you have testimony. Please go ahead.
Hello, am I the one you beeped?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Joan Floyd. Hello, Chairman Reisinger and
Hello.
committee members. Can you hear me? Can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. And I want to thank the committee members for some really great questions and really great points that were raised. I really appreciated those when I was taking notes. What I heard from the proponents of this bill was really that they're asking for a big policy change. It sounds like they want us to go from billboards are, generally not good. They need to be highly regulated. They need to be reduced to, hey, billboards are great. And that's not the bill that's obviously in front of you right now. That's not the issue, whether we need to make a big policy change. The truth is we still have this policy, and it's very popular, very well developed, that billboards are generally not a good thing, and that we need to reduce the number of them, and we need to remove some. And this is where I'm going to be speaking from an individual resident perspective, because my neighborhood is Remington, and we have a lot of billboards. We have them in industrial zones. We have them in commercial zones, which can also be residential areas. We have them in or near residential zones. And I think that it's clear to me, looking at this bill, that if it passes, no billboards are going to get removed, in my neighborhood. So that's definitely a bad thing. I think the idea that somehow we should be starting to look at these on an individual basis, that just gives me a big headache. I just can imagine all those, visits to the zoning board. And I'll bet you Mary Pat probably has the same headache. I think that if you choose a number of owners, and this has been discussed, that is going to be challenged, and it will end up going by the wayside, and it will end up being one, just a one-to-one thing. And like I said, that's not going to eliminate any billboards. I have a really big problem with the proposal in the bill to eliminate the specifications. I think actually planning staff did a really good job, Eric, of analyzing and explaining why getting rid of those specifications is a bad thing, why they should not be eliminated, what the consequences could be. So rather than try to go into the weeds of that, I just want to say that I agree with their analysis of that. The 15-foot thing should stay, and all the other, specifications should stay. So again, thank you very much. I think I've said what I wanted to say. If anybody has any questions?
No, Ms. Floyd, thank you for your thoughts, your testimony, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One more caller. You now, caller, if you have testimony, please go ahead. No response. Mr. Chair, I think that is all of the public testimony.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we don't need a finding of fact, but there is an amendment from the Planning Commission. So I make a motion to move the Planning Commission's amendment. Do I hear a second? Going twice, do I have a second? The Planning Commission motion fails, lack of a second. So at this time, I move the bill. Do I have a second to move the bill? I ask again, do I have a second? No second, so the bill fails by not having a second to the motion. I just want to, before we conclude, I think this was a very healthy hearing. I want to thank my colleagues on the committee for your testimony, your questions, your input, also the callers that have called in. And I want to thank everyone. I know it's a Friday, and we usually have our land use hearings on Wednesday, but because of the amount of land use hearings that we have, I want to thank all my committee members for showing up today and testifying and taking the time. So if anyone else has anything they want to say before I conclude, just raise your hand. Councilman Clark, Councilwoman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for your leadership here. We don't usually have this happen. I'm happy it did, but does this mean that the bill is defeated? So it's not gonna, it's gone.
It didn't pass because we didn't have.
No, I know that. So it's as if it's just disappeared from this term of office.
But yeah, the votes ain't there, correct.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Okay, so at this time, City Council Bill 20-0623. Thank you.